Evan Hale arrived on Station Lurea with a toolbox in his left hand and a data pad under his arm. He was a human engineer, young but already respected for his calm working style. Most humans who came to alien stations were loud, curious, and excited, but Evan was different. He liked quiet places. He liked simple work. He liked to understand machines that never asked complicated questions. Station Lurea was peaceful compared to many places he had been sent to before. It was a mix of species, shapes, sizes, and colors, all moving through the bright halls at their own pace. Many visitors admired the place, but Evan noticed something else on his first day. He saw her. A tiny alien girl sat alone on a long bench near the workshop corridor. She was so small that her feet did not touch the ground. Her skin was pale with a soft glow, and her eyes were large, shaped like drops of water. Many passed her without looking. Some glanced at her only for a moment, then continued walking. She sat with her hands folded on her lap, not speaking, not moving much, almost like a quiet shadow. The commander had told him, "Do your repairs. Don't get involved with anything strange." Evan had nodded, but his eyes kept returning to the tiny girl whenever he passed that bench. She was always there, always silent, always alone. Her name, he later learned, was Leary. She was from a species called the Velen, known throughout the galaxy for their gentle nature and soft voices. People said their bodies were too fragile, their hearts too emotional, and their presence too quiet. Many ignored them. Many forgot them, and Leary seemed to be the smallest among them. Every day, Evan walked past her bench, and every day he felt a small pull inside his chest. He did not know why. He had seen many lonely people before. He had seen entire worlds destroyed, but something about Leary made the air feel different. She did not look sad. She did not look angry. She simply looked waiting for someone. For something. While fixing a damaged power coil one morning, Evan found himself thinking about her again. He wiped sweat from his forehead and told himself to focus. The energy cores on this station were old and unstable. They needed careful repairs. But whenever he walked through the corridor, his eyes went to the bench automatically. One day, he noticed something new. She was not just sitting, she was watching him. Her eyes followed him quietly. Not in a demanding way, not in a way that asked anything from him, but in a way that said she noticed him just as much as he noticed her. Evan slowed his pace and then stopped completely. Several aliens in the hall looked confused. He turned and walked toward the long bench, toward Leary. No one expected him to do that. He sat down beside her. It was the simplest action he had ever taken, yet the most surprising thing the station had seen. A few aliens gasped softly. Others stared. Leary herself froze like a startled creature. Her small fingers tightened together. Evan did not speak. He simply took out a small device from his pocket, a broken scanner that he had planned to fix later, and started working on it. His presence was quiet, steady, calm, just like she had been all this time. Minutes passed. Her breathing, which had become fast, slowly returned to normal. She looked at him from the corner of her eye as if trying to understand why he chose to sit here. Evan kept his focus on the device, giving her space. He did not expect her to respond, but after a while she made a tiny movement. She shifted closer, only an inch, almost invisible, but he noticed. He pretended not to react, but inside he felt something warm. She then lifted one hand and lightly tapped the tool he was using. Evan paused and looked at the tool, then at her. Leary made a small gesture with her fingers, pointing to a connection point he had not checked yet. Evan raised his brows a little. She was right. He adjusted the device. It worked immediately. Leary lowered her hand gently, as if worried she had done something wrong. Evan gave a small, soft smile. She blinked, her glow becoming slightly brighter. Perhaps this was her version of a smile, People walking by slowed their steps, whispering. The quietest species in the station sat beside the calmest human. No one had ever seen such a thing. From that moment, something changed. Evan began sitting beside her every day during his break. He never forced conversation. He simply worked on his tools while she silently watched or pointed at something he missed. Sometimes she moved closer, sometimes she stayed still, but she was always there when he arrived. On the fourth day, she surprised him. He was fixing a small circuit, and when he looked up, she was holding a spare part in her hand. It was exactly the part he needed. He accepted it. She looked very proud for a moment before sitting back politely. Their cooperation became a quiet language. Evan spoke only when necessary. Leary spoke not at all, but her gestures said enough. A tap meant, check this. A point meant, it's loose. A small motion of her hand meant, danger. Her understanding of energy circuits was strange and almost instinctive. Evan began to wonder how much she saw that others did not. Rumors spread fast. Why does a human sit with a Velen girl? Does he not know her people are too weak? Maybe he feels sorry for her. Evan ignored all of it. He did not feel sorry for Leary. He did not see her as weak. He simply saw someone who deserved company, and who had a mind sharper than most engineers he met. One evening, as he finished repairing the last of the small devices, Leary touched his sleeve very lightly. It was the first time she ever initiated contact. Evan looked down at her. She pointed toward the main energy chamber. Her eyes darker than usual. He understood she was worried. He checked his pad. The readings from the core were unstable. Later, the commander called an emergency meeting. The energy cores were showing signs of failing. If they collapsed, the station could lose power or worse. Panic spread quickly. Several engineers refused to go near the core. It was too dangerous. Evan stepped forward. I'll do it. The room fell silent. The commander looked half relieved, half concerned. Evan was skilled, but the core was unpredictable. You'll need help, the commander said. Evan knew the truth. No engineer on the station understood the energy flow as well as Leary did. He turned and saw her standing at the doorway, her small frame almost hidden behind a pillar. Her eyes were fixed on him, full of fear, not for herself, but for the station. He nodded at her gently. Leary walked forward, tiny steps but steady. Several officers stared at her. Some whispered, "She can't help." Others looked confused. But she came to stand beside Evan, her chin lifted slightly, her hands trembling but determined. The commander looked between them and then sighed. If you trust her, I will too. Together, Evan and Leary entered the energy chamber. The door sealed behind them with a heavy hiss. The light inside flickered. Bright cracks appeared across the core. Alarms flashed red across the screens. Evan moved fast, checking pressure valves. Leary stood beside him, her eyes glowing brighter as she studied the unstable energy patterns. She raised her hand and made a sweeping gesture. Evan understood. Shift the coolant flow. They worked together in perfect silence. For the first time, Evan truly saw how special she was. Where others saw chaos, she saw paths. Where others saw danger, she saw solutions. Her small hands moved in the air, guiding him like invisible lines he had to follow. The core shook violently. A loud blast of air burst out. Leary stepped back, startled. Evan quickly moved in front of her, shielding her from debris. She looked up at him with wide, trembling eyes. He gave a short nod. He was fine. She took a deep breath and continued her silent guidance. Minutes felt like hours. The heat increased. The alarms grew louder. Evan felt sweat dripping into his eyes, but he kept working, trusting every signal Leary gave him. She never made a sound, but her courage echoed loudly in the room. Finally, the core calmed. The cracks began to close. The light steadied. The alarm turned green. The chamber became still. Evan sat down on the floor, exhausted. Leary stood beside him, shaking slightly from fear and relief. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly reached out and touched his arm gently, as if checking if he was truly safe. Evan smiled faintly. "We did it," he whispered. Outside the chamber, the crew waited anxiously. When the doors opened and the two stepped out, Leary in front, Evan behind, everyone stared in shock. The tiniest alien on the station had helped save them. No one said anything at first. They simply watched her with new eyes. For the first time since she arrived, Leary did not look down. She stood close to Evan, calm and steady. And Evan, without saying a word, walked back to the long bench with her and sat down exactly where he always did. Part 1 ends here. The station was quiet after the core incident, but the calm did not last long. Word of what had happened spread like fire through the halls. Crew members whispered about the human engineer and the tiny alien girl who had saved the energy core. Many came to look at her to see if the stories were true. Some expected a scared, trembling creature, but Leary stood with a quiet pride that no one had ever seen before. Evan noticed the glances but did not flinch. He did not need recognition. He only needed her to know she had a place beside him. For months, she had been invisible, and now, finally, someone, him, had shown that small acts of courage mattered. The commander approached them quietly in the corridor. He was an older alien, tall and stern, with sharp amber eyes. "Leary," he said softly, "come with me. I want to speak with you." Leary's small frame stiffened. She had never been called personally by the commander before. She glanced at Evan. He gave her a slight nod, reassuring her without words. They entered a quiet office filled with glowing screens. The commander gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself onto a chair, feet barely reaching the floor. "I have been told you saved the station," the commander said, watching her closely. "Explain how you did it." Leary's large eyes met his, and slowly she lifted her hands. She gestured exactly as she had in the energy chamber, showing the paths of energy, the shifts, the patterns no human or alien engineer could understand without her guidance. Evan watched quietly from the corner, his heart swelling with pride. The commander leaned back, nodding slowly. "So, it was not luck. You understood what others could not see. The station owes you its life." Leary blinked. She had never expected such words. Never before had anyone acknowledged her intelligence, her ability. She had been quiet, ignored, and often overlooked. Now she felt weight lift from her chest. For the first time, she understood that she was seen, truly seen. When they returned to the main corridor, the whispers had grown louder. Aliens who had ignored her for years now bowed their heads slightly, showing respect. Leary did not know how to react. She glanced at Evan. He gave her a small, encouraging smile. That was enough. She had him, and he had always trusted her without hesitation. Days passed. Life on the station slowly returned to its rhythm, but something had changed. People began to notice the tiny alien girl in new ways. She was no longer just the fragile Velen girl who never spoke. She was the girl who had saved the station with a human beside her. She became a quiet legend, not because of fame, but because someone, Evan, had believed in her, and that belief made her strong. Evan continued to sit beside her during his breaks. Their quiet companionship grew into something deeper, though neither spoke about it. Their connection was in gestures, shared glances, and the silent understanding that each would watch out for the other. Leary began to smile more. Her small fingers moved with confidence when guiding repairs. She even started to teach other young Velen the techniques she had learned instinctively. But she always saved a spot for Evan. He was still the one who had chosen to sit with her when no one else had. One morning, a message arrived from the station council. They needed engineers for a critical mission. The energy network connecting several nearby stations was failing. If the mission failed, multiple stations could lose power. Evan was chosen to lead the team. When he read the message, he immediately turned to Leary. "I will need you with me," he said. She looked at him, startled. She had never been part of a mission outside the station, never expected to be needed in such a dangerous way. Her instincts told her to stay behind, but Evan's silent gaze told her to trust him. She nodded, small but firm. The journey to the network control station was tense. Strange winds and magnetic storms battered the transport ship. Most crew members were anxious, but Leary stayed close to Evan. She held his hand lightly, not because she needed protection, but because it anchored her confidence. Evan did not speak. He simply adjusted the controls, keeping the ship steady. Together they made an unspoken promise. They would face whatever came, side by side. When they arrived, the control station was already unstable. Lights flickered, alarms rang, and the air was filled with static energy. Other engineers hesitated. They were unsure how to handle the delicate network nodes. Evan stepped forward, taking the lead. Leary followed, observing the energy flows carefully. Her antenna-like fibers vibrated slightly, a sign that she was sensing patterns in ways others could not. She pointed to critical nodes and directed Evan with precise gestures. At first, the others did not understand, but as Evan followed her guidance, they realized she was correct. Every movement she suggested prevented overloads, short circuits, and potential collapses. Slowly, they started to trust her instincts. The mission became a success because of the teamwork between the human and the tiny alien girl. During the repair, an unexpected surge blasted from a node. Sparks flew across the room. Evan pushed one engineer out of harm's way and took the shock himself. Leary's eyes widened, but she did not hesitate. She crawled into a narrow access passage that only her small frame could fit. There, she adjusted delicate circuits that no one else could reach. Evan watched, admiring her courage. Even in the face of danger, she remained focused and calm. When she emerged from the passage, sweat glistened on her pale skin, but she smiled faintly at him. He nodded, silently telling her she had done well. The network stabilized. Alarms stopped. Lights returned to normal. The team around them erupted into cheers, but Leary felt overwhelmed by the attention. She turned her gaze to Evan. His eyes met hers, filled with quiet pride. He gave a small smile. "You did amazing," he said. That simple acknowledgement meant more than any applause from the others. It was proof that her value had been seen and appreciated by someone who truly mattered. Back on Station Lurea, the story of the tiny alien girl and the human engineer spread even further. People who once ignored Leary now sought her advice. They asked her questions, wanting to understand the ways she guided energy flows with such precision. Leary, who had spent years in silence, began to speak in short sentences, answering their questions confidently, but she never spoke more than she needed. Words were unnecessary when her actions already told the truth. She was brilliant, capable, and brave. Evan continued to sit beside her. Every day, no matter what happened on the station, he made time for her. And Leary, who had once been invisible, began to look forward to their silent companionship. She learned to smile more openly, laugh softly at small jokes, and even tease him lightly with gestures he had come to understand perfectly. One evening, after another long day of repairs, Leary finally spoke in full sentences for the first time to Evan. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling just slightly, "for sitting with me." She looked down at her hands, unsure if she had said it correctly. Evan smiled, reaching out to gently lift her chin. "You helped me first," he replied. "I only returned the favor." Leary's eyes widened, and for a moment, she did not move. Then, slowly, she smiled fully, the kind of smile that could light up the dimmest corridor on the station. She realized that trust, quiet courage, and simple kindness could change everything. From that day forward, the bench near the workshop corridor became a symbol, not of her smallness, not of her fragility, but of her strength and of the human who had seen it. Other Velen children sat beside her, learning from her bravery. Crew members smiled when they saw the two together. And still, Leary always left a space for Evan. He was more than an engineer. He was the one who had chosen her when no one else would. The station thrived. Repairs were easier, conflicts were calmer. The quiet example of trust and partnership spread across the corridors. Leary had changed, but more importantly, the station had changed too. People learned that no one should be ignored. No one was too small to make a difference, and sometimes the quietest, smallest creatures held the greatest power. Evan and Leary continued their silent companionship. Their actions spoke louder than words, teaching others the true meaning of courage, trust, and friendship. Leary no longer feared being invisible. She had been seen, and that made all the difference. Every day she sat on her bench, the tiny alien girl no longer alone, always waiting for the human engineer who had chosen to sit beside her silently, and who would never leave her side. Even when the station faced storms, technical failures, or unexpected crises, the bond between the human and the Velen girl remained unbroken. They did not need words to understand each other. They only needed presence, trust, and quiet courage. The galaxy had seen many heroes, but few were like them, small and large, quiet and strong, human and alien, together, proving that heart, skill, and understanding could save more than just machines. It could save lives, and in the process, it saved a soul that had once felt invisible. Leary looked at Evan, and in that silent moment, she understood something she had never realized before. Heroism was not always loud or violent. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was simple. Sometimes it was a human sitting beside a tiny alien girl on a long bench, doing nothing but being there. And sometimes that was enough to change the world. From that day on, every time Leary and Evan sat together, the station seemed brighter. The air seemed lighter. And for the first time in her life, Leary knew she had a place, a purpose, and someone who believed in her unconditionally. The tiny alien girl who no one ever sat beside had found her companion, her hero, and her friend. And together, they would face every challenge that came, silently yet powerfully, side by side.